You've got to be kidding me. 150 episodes. It's time to celebrate. You're listening to the Master Your Lens podcast. Episode 1. Wait a minute. We can't do it the same way. This is episode 150.
Hey, John Lee Dumas here, the founder and host of EO Fire, and welcome to the Master Your Lens podcast, the photography podcast dedicated to sharing inspiring stories, technical tips, and powerful secrets to help you become a better photographer. And now, your host, Matthew Jordan Smith.
Hello, Photography Nation. Wow, I cannot believe it. It is the 150th episode of the Master Your Lens podcast. And I am definitely in the mood to celebrate and really talk to you about what we love, photography. So today, I'd like to invite you to our free Facebook group, Photography Lighting Ninjas. If you're hearing this podcast today, the day it comes out, Wednesday, February 19th, 2020, I want you to join me for a live discussion in our Facebook group tonight. That's right. If you have joined Photography Lighting Ninjas Facebook page, and it's free, go on Facebook, put in Photography Lighting Ninjas, and join the group. Tonight, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to do a live discussion about what we love, photography. And we're going to focus on shadows. Now, if you miss it, don't worry. It's going to be recorded on the page, so you can see it at any time. So definitely join the group, Photography Lighting Ninjas. It's our free Facebook group. The date again, February 19th, 2020. The time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The place, the Facebook group, Photography Lighting Ninjas. I can't wait to see you there. You'll be able to ask questions in the group. Now this month, we've been talking about the love of shadows. We're used to hearing photographers talk about the love of light. But you can't have light and not love the shadows as well. And the funny thing is, once you turn things around and start really looking at shadows, you learn to love light just that much more. So let's go deeper into talking about shadows. Hopefully you're on the Facebook page. Hopefully you've joined Photography Lighting Ninjas by now. The image that I used to make the announcement about tonight's live session is an image I've received a lot of compliments on. And people often say, "Oh, Matthew, I love the light in this picture." But what makes that picture so special is the light and the shadows. Today, we're going to talk about hard and soft shadows and all the levels in between. So let me ask you, how do you like your shadows? Sounds like a funny question, right? How do you like your shadows? Well, Matthew, I'll take mine sunny side up. I think I learned how to really see shadows and see how important they are when I was a young assistant in my early 20s, and I was working for a photographer in New York City. His name was Neil Barr. He had an amazing studio on Central Park West, a very expensive place to have a studio, even back in the 80s. It was right by Central Park. For lunch, we could go to the roof and overlook all of New York City and look right into Central Park, a prime location for a high-end fashion studio. Neil Barr used to work for Irving Penn. one of the godfathers of fashion photography. And he was an amazing photographer. Well, actually, he still is an amazing photographer. It was hard working for Neil. He ran a tight ship, and he went through assistants like water. Neil's studio was designed in the same way Irving Penn's studio was designed. It was gigantic. And we're talking about New York City, where space is a premium. When you walked into the studio, everything, every wall, was covered in black velvet. So it was a dark space. I often think about that because every rental studio you walk into, be it in New York City, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Paris, most of them are white spaces. All white spaces. Not Neil Barr. Every studio, Neil's studio, had black velvet curtains. Now, maybe you're wondering why. The reason was he wanted to make sure there was an absence of light, unless he wanted the light. He also wanted to make sure he could control the shadows. Now, this is the 80s, and Neil shot fashion photography with a 4x5 film camera. Well, back then, that's all we had. His camera of choice was a Sinar P2. And working for Neil, you had to be really good at changing 4x5 film in the darkroom. I would load film and then unload film at the end of the shoot. Now, during those shoots, no one was allowed to speak, and Neil was not a talker. He was totally focused on photography. Even with clients, he didn't allow them to really speak on the set. He wanted everyone's focus on the job at hand. Now, yes, of course, the client had more leeway to speak to Neil about what we were shooting, but no idle conversations were allowed. Now imagine this. We're shooting 4x5 film, and 4x5 Polaroid, and we're shooting fashion. Neil would shoot Polaroids. We'd wait for 90 seconds for the Polaroid to develop. Then I'd pull the Polaroid and hand it to Neil, and he'd stop and look at that Polaroid and study it. I can see this scene in my head so well because everybody is stopping to look and see if he approves of the shot. And for the most part, it's a quiet, dark studio. Now, I'd see the Polaroid, of course, and to me, it looked perfect. He was a master at light, and a lot of what I learned from Neil Barr. But Neil would see that Polaroid and see something was missing. Neil had a very unique system for adding fill on set. Imagine pulling a window shade down to block out the light. Well, Neil had something like this in his studio, but he pulled the curtain down to add fill light to the set. There were 3 white curtains that acted as fill cards. They were gigantic, and they were made like a window shade. I'd never seen that before, and I've never seen that since. A very unique system, but it worked to give beautiful fill light. Neil would look at the Polaroid, then ask one of the assistants to pull down curtain 1, 2, or 3 to add the right amount of fill light to the set. He had 3 curtains installed on the ceiling of the studio, and you could pull them down all the way to the floor. These were very long curtains. I have no idea where he found them. But we pulled down curtain number 1, a fully white curtain. He'd take another Polaroid, and then he'd say, "Oh, okay, now we're ready." Now, for a long time after the shoot, I'd look at those 2 Polaroids, the one before the curtain was pulled down and the one after. and I could not tell the difference until one day when I finally saw that slight variation in the shadows. Now, it wasn't a big difference, but it was a difference. And it took me a long time to see it. But the day I saw that difference, I was so happy. And that day, it made me learn how to see shadows and how important they are. Now, let me ask you again. How do you like your shadows? There are hard shadows, soft shadows, and many variations in between. When it comes to creating your look of photography, it's not just about the light. It's also about the shadows. Do you like them deep or a little softer or very soft? All of these things make a difference. You've just got to learn how to see. Last week, I mentioned the movie Minority Report, where there's a scene where the main female actress says, "Can you see?" After I recorded that podcast, I had to watch the movie again. You can find it on Netflix. It's a very interesting movie, and for some reason, I've always liked that movie. Can you see the shadows and how important those shadows are? When you are choosing your modifier, whichever one you like the most, don't just look at the light, but learn to really focus also on the shadows. It makes a difference. Now, when we talk about shadows and modifiers, almost every modifier you own, you can continue to modify even that modifier. Sounds funny, I know, but you can change your modifier. And very often, people can't see that difference when they start messing around with their modifiers. Let's say you have a softbox. Most softboxes have 2 different levels of diffusion. You can take one out. A lot of people can't tell that difference when they take one of the diffusion panels out. Yes, it changes the softness of the light, but it also changes the shadows. Learn to look deeper at your light modifiers, not only at the light, but at the shadows. Then also go deeper. Find out if you want the shadows to look hard or soft or any increment in between. You can change that with just changing your amount of fill. That's what Neil was doing. Neil had a totally black studio, black velvet all the way around. We'd set our light. We'd measure our light to get it just right. And then he'd add one of his curtains as a white fill. And that fill would open the shadows just a little bit. And that's when he loved it. Sometimes it'd be one curtain, sometimes it'd be 2, sometimes it would be all 3, depending on what we were shooting. But he trained his eye to see all those small nuances in between. And that is beautiful. Now tonight, I'd love for you to bring your questions all about the love of shadows to our live session for February. Come and join me on that free Facebook group, Photography Lighting Ninjas. It's our free Facebook group where we discuss photography, lighting, in all different aspects. This month, we are talking about shadows, the love of shadows. After the live session, I'll be jumping on an airplane and flying to Las Vegas because it's time for WPPI, one of the biggest photo conferences in America. I will be speaking next Wednesday on the Nikon stage from 10:15 to 10:45. If you're in Vegas at WPPI, definitely come out and see me and all the other Nikon ambassadors on stage. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a great day. And I hope you can join me tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for our live discussion on the free Facebook group Photography Lighting Ninjas. I'm really looking forward to seeing you. All right, Photography Nation. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Master Your Lens podcast. If you have not joined the Facebook group, please do so now. And then join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I look forward to seeing you there. I'm photographer Matthew Jordan Smith, saying, always dream big. Bye for now.